I'll share with your listeners, I'm 51 years old. I'm on my fourth long-term committed relationship. I was married for 17 years. I have 4 children. They're now 17, 19, 20, and 25. I have experienced so much of what we're talking about here. And really, it did propel my own personal growth journey. And through my own healing, I went on certification pathways, and everything I'm certified in, I have benefited from myself.
And you're an MD.
Yeah, that is the complex thinking. I'm an internal medicine doctor. Yeah.
You're so cute. I freaking love the way that you reacted to those credentials. You're so enthused about these other ones. Most people are like, MD, oh wow. And you're just like, no, that's not the one that does it for me.
Because being a medical doctor, I guess what you're sensing is that I have a lot of judgments about the current healthcare system as it exists. And I am sad that many physicians are perpetuating the model by continuing to practice within it. So I have always been self-employed. As soon as I realized what the model was, I divorced Western medicine and have been blazing my own path through my own business, through my own life. And that is really where a lot of that comes from. So personally, I've had my private practice taking care of the same group of people in the suburbs for 22 years, which has given me a front row seat to all the affairs, all the divorces, all the marriages, all the babies, all the putting your parents in assisted living, like the full catastrophe of human existence. And it hasn't been easy for me, and it hasn't been easy for anyone I know. So why don't we start figuring out where are the pain points? Because we are complex adaptive systems, and there is no one thing that's causing all of this. It's multifactorial, and it really takes people who are doing the kind of work that you're doing, where what you want to be is a seeker after truth.
Yes.
And sometimes there's that movie, You Can't Handle the Truth. And that's true. Like, we sometimes can't handle the truth about ourselves. We can't handle the truth about our partner. We can't handle the truth about the world. But whenever I work with a client, it really is about, let's just make it real. There are no angels. There are no devils. But let's just make it real. We're all just dancing to our own little agenda. And
oh my gosh,
the sooner we can be honest about that, the sooner we can write a better script.
We are going to talk about that one comment you made to me that totally threw me into the ethers, where I was like, huh? What? Say it again.
Which one was that?
You had said the energy field of desire is unconscious.
Yeah.
And it was so sweet because you had seen me in my perplexed momentary. I just took that in for a second. I don't know how to deal with this information.
Yeah.
And you were like, that doesn't mean that you don't have a choice. And I was like, oh, okay. I see what she's getting at. But still wanted to give you really the space to educate me and the audience on that statement that you made to me, because it struck me. It absolutely struck me. Yeah. Because then I started to see it kind of surface in other ways in my life.
Yeah. I'd love to hear the ways too.
Oh my God. I was thinking the mutual connection point of there being unmet desire.
Yeah.
And 2 people who carry that desire crossing paths, how inevitable it is for it to cycle on.
Because people are always talking about, how do you even define infidelity?
Oh, yeah.
I think that most people know when they're in a zone that their partner would be uncomfortable with and how to navigate it if you want to honor your partner, but also honor yourself. Do you know what I mean?
It all gets so convoluted. I don't know. Maybe it's because my mind has all of these stories inside of it.
Mm-hmm. I just think that what I'm hearing you say is, when we're talking about relationships between 2 humans, how can there be, it should be this way 100% of the time in all situations? Because that's like always and never are never true.
I used to say blanket statements rarely cover everybody.
And it's always an exercise in that serenity prayer. God grant me the strength to change the things I can change and whatever. It's also, you could say, make that the integrity prayer. God grant me the strength to make the choices that I know that I should make, and whether that's to speak or not to speak about something, and the wisdom to know the difference. Because sometimes we're so afraid to talk about something because it is such a trigger for me or them or both. But if it keeps presenting itself, then not talking about it it's clearly like the universe is asking you to give voice to it.
Yeah.
Or to be very clear, there's always that possibility for self-deceit. As humans, we're really good at packaging something in a way that's palatable for ourselves.
So, did I tell you about the male client that I had who signed up for coaching? He knows what my brand is all about. But I don't cheat on my wife. I'm like, tell me more. I don't actually have sex with these women. And so in his mind, he's not cheating on his wife. And it's like this, he creates his own rule book, essentially.
Exactly.
And I think we're all doing that all the time.
We are.
Yeah, the rationalizing of why we do what we do, which I think is just a bypass into, if you're rationalizing, are you really working to understand?
Right.
Or are you just measuring and becoming complacent?
I think that we need to tend sexual instinctual energy the same way that we tend to fire. So we have to allow it to have some expression, because who wants to live a life where there is no internal pain? And yet we have to honor that fire is something that requires skillfulness and awareness. And sometimes you think, oh, I can do a controlled burn here of this patch. And then all of a sudden the entire place is going down. So maintaining humility in the face of sexual instinctual energy is something that I think we all need to continue to practice.
Oh my God, I love you. So first of all, what is an energy field?
Yeah. So whenever I think about what is driving myself as a human and all the other humans around me, I really make it super simple and I bring it down to instinctual energy. And of course, we can splice and dice things in a million different ways, but many people break instinctual energies into three main forces. And that is the self preservation instinct, which is the instinct to stay alive. It's what makes us go to work. It's what makes us pay our bills. It's what makes us sleep and eat and get water and regulate our temperature. People are motivated to be comfortable. Okay. And then the second instinctual energy is social. And this is because we know that as one little singular human in the world, without the help of any other human, we're going to die. We need to form groups so that we can combine our skills, so that we can support each other, so that we can have each other's back. And so this is why many things that we're being driven on has to do with what are my relationships with and my connections. But social is a big energy field. It's like I've got room for multiple children, multiple friends, multiple family members, multiple work colleagues. You all get to come in. So social instinctual energy is a little bit lighter. Now, sexual instinctual energy is that third force that we're really exploring here on the podcast. And sometimes we call sexual instinctual energy, you'll hear it called one-to-one. But people can get confused because it's different than, oh, I love my best friend and we're going to stay up all night talking and it's just the two of us. If you don't want to penetrate every single boundary that your friend has in her entire existence and literally merge as one human and climb inside and connect all of your fluids, then that's not sexual instinctual energy. Sexual instinctual energy is bring all the boundaries down. I have a life force. I have something emerging from me, and you have a life force, and you have something emerging from you. And what we want is fusion. And we want to merge those two things together because we know that when we get all up in each other's business, that something new is going to emerge from that the universe is telling me is pretty intoxicating and pretty sweet. That doesn't necessarily mean that this is your soulmate or that this is forever and ever and always. And there's a lot that's feeding into that. Part of it, I believe, is definitely biological. Pheromones are a very real thing. So when we talk about what's unconscious, we all probably know that there are certain people that we just love the way they smell. And there
Mhm.
are certain people that we just don't like the way they smell. And that's really important information because that's your animal nature telling you this is a good connection or not a good connection. But something like the way you smell is only one element of it. When we're talking about how you smell, that's your entire energy field as a whole. So it's something about the way you speak. It's something about the way you look. It's something about the way you move. It's something about the way that you look at me because we're all, when we're self connected, expressing our energy.
Mhm.
And what happens is that when we think about somebody that we don't particularly like, there's something aversive coming up. Usually that's when somebody is not in a very authentic expression of themselves. So sometimes if you see somebody really in a state of flow, it's like, I am just out on the dance floor, like dancing my heart out. I am singing, I am presenting, I'm just not caught up in myself.
Mhm.
That's when somebody gets the most pure expression of your flavor. And that's often when these circumstances happen. It's very rare that you see a mom neurotically watching her children in the grocery store, trying to navigate checkout, and somebody's, wow, that is hot. Because you're not actually self connected to who you are as a human. You're caught up in the busyness and the to dos and the expectations of the external world, which is why we often lose this connection to our own sexual energy and to our partner's sexual energy and to this beautiful union that we've created because we don't allow it the space where those pressures from the self preservation and the social instincts can fall away and we
Mhm.
can find our way to that again. Because all three of these instincts don't really exist in harmony that well. It's a perpetual balancing act. And we have to think of it like a tripod stool. And if one of the legs on the stool gets yanked out and isn't there giving any support, you're going to tilt because that side will need to be acknowledged, experienced, expressed. I'm talking about this panoply, and I'm not sure if that's a real word, but it's coming to me, this collection of things that express as a, I want more of that.
Yeah. Holy shit. Okay. So you just blew my mind. And I'm sure you're blowing the mind of a lot of the listeners because one of the things that comes up repetitively inside of the community is that these women who have been in long-term affairs are like, I cannot stand the way my husband smells, and I haven't been able to stand it for years. And they try to force themselves to figure out what's wrong with them.
Yeah. So it's super common and it's actually a form of avoidant attachment situations.
Mhm.
Because what happens, your listeners are probably looking into attachment. This is something that we all turn to when we're trying to figure out like what's going on between me and my partner. So your listeners probably know that there's anxious or ambivalent attachment, there's avoidant attachment, and there's disorganized attachment. And one of the things as a person who loves attachment theory that I want to say is that we don't have just one. Different people are going to bring out different attachment styles from us depending upon how they're showing up. And
Mhm.
regardless of how integrated we are, the right combination of messed up behaviors will bring out a bubble of disorganized attachment. So if you've ever felt a little bit crazy or you've noticed your partner went a little bit crazy, that's because you just wandered into a little trauma bubble. It's a place where you have some extra tenderness. So it's important to just know those parts of yourselves that have anxious attachment, the parts of yourselves that have avoidant attachment, and the parts of yourselves that have disorganized attachment.
Okay, so I want you to really clean this up for the audience because I
Mm-hmm.
know that a lot of my listeners are dedicated viewers of short form content.
Yep.
And a lot of these concepts have been completely bastardized.
Yes.
And the avoidant attachment area, and I am by no means an expert. I'm here to model what it's like to be a student. So in the scenario where the woman is absolutely disgusted by the scent of her spouse, she is not avoidant to her spouse. She is avoidant to her own instincts that are propelling her into that direction. Is that correct?
I think it's really interesting what you're bringing up. There's not a lot of clarity in the space, so I have to back it up for 1 minute because I introduced your listeners to the concepts of the instinctual drives, and those are the things that fire first. We are animals at the end of the day, and that's going to happen first. The second thing that gets ignited are the emotional circuits, and I don't know if you guys have talked about Jaak Panksepp's work at all on this show.
Nope, but
So
you're
yeah.
going to be back. I
Okay.
can already feel it.
So the emotional circuits are also unconscious. So instinctual drive energy, it's just going to happen. Then an emotional circuit is going to play off. And these emotional circuits we see in all mammals. So the circuits are care, play, rage, fear, grief, sexuality. There's 7, maybe 8 of them, depending upon how you define it. And these are also things that are going to cause a whole collection of responses inside the body that are completely unconscious and that we are not choosing. What happens then is that the brain will start to make up stories about the sensations that the body is having. Because if we want to just talk about the disgust circuit, that's the circuit that protects you from eating rotten food. If you grab something from the refrigerator and you put it in your mouth and it's spoiled, you're going to go bleh, and you're going to spit it out. It's your body saying, do not take this in. This is not good for you. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, if your husband is doing something like farting right in front of you or not showering or just not
No,
presenting
so they
himself
try everything
I know
into
they're
pen.
trying now, but I'm saying I'm talking about behaviors. I'm not talking about things that lead to being unclean. So let me clarify, because when I'm talking
Okay.
about farting or not taking care of yourself or just not even acknowledging you, looking at you, kissing you, like basically making you feel the way that you felt when you were first together, there's all these little quiet things that are happening that are triggering the disgust circuit. And it's that little bubble inside your head that's going, I can't believe you just, okay? But we're programmed to be good little girls most of the time. And historically, we had to be, because if we just said those things, like Anne Boleyn got beheaded by King Henry VIII, women got smacked. We learned way early on not to say things that our bodies were telling us. And because we want to be kind, and because there's a disconnect between what my body is telling me and how my head and heart are telling me that I should feel, we now start to enter a battle zone between what the body is saying and wanting and what the head and heart are saying it should be.
Right.
So we can now start to make up a whole bunch of stories about how this relationship is over. And then we're going to have a bunch of feelings, which I'm being very clear are different than emotions. Emotional circuits are unconscious. Feelings we have conscious control over, because we have conscious control over thinking. So this is why we have to definitely acknowledge what's happening and not lie about that. But then we get to do this whole unpacking of when did that start, what was happening, and what's coming up for me. Now, sometimes this goes on for so long, that person is such a trigger for that physical response that it can be very difficult to unwind. So I don't want your listeners to hear that every relationship can be fixed if you hate the way your partner smells or you have this aversive reaction, because it often can't. Like, things get laid down and it's just really hard to unwind them. But to understand how you got to that place in the first place is going to be really important with the next partner, because it's a high likelihood that guy that smelled so good when you started being together and now shows up with a collection of behaviors that are not what you want in a sexual partner, that same I don't like the way he smells thing is likely to happen again. So understanding what laid down the tracks of that pattern is part of this whole exploration process.
Oh my God. wow, am I lucky that you and I crossed paths? I completely agree. I couldn't look away. There was like an aspect of me that couldn't look away because this whole thing was like a love the girl that you were 10 years ago type thing.
Right.
And accept her for who she is and be grateful for like where she took you. And looking when women started inviting me into literally their homes, and I would be like on a screen just working to encourage them and help them figure out what it is that they wanted to do next with their life and really just be a soundboard. Because I think a lot of the women that I meet are in extreme isolation.
Yes.
Like they live in rural areas. They don't have a lot of access to peer connection.
Yeah.
And a lot of their social circles suck.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to be quite frank. Some of these friends, my listeners, do not know how to handle people with you.
Yeah.
And it's not like, oh, don't be their friend, but it's more just be aware of the people around you and their capacity to actually be helpful to you in conversation.
Well, the people that you're talking to who are even recognizing these things, typically it requires a highly sensitive person to be born into an environment where they're like, something about the way everybody's doing things here is messed up. And so we start responding to cues, and sexual instinctual energy is simply a cue. And when I talk about sexual instinctual energy, that's not necessarily only about sex. That's the most basic form of it. But as humans, we can connect with sexual instinctual energy through art, through nature, through music, through any divine experience that you have that sort of transports you to another place. This is sexual instinctual energy because it's leading you somewhere. I can't help but smell it and follow it. And so the more that we can cultivate this in areas of our lives outside of our partnership with our spouse, the more likely we are to stay fulfilled and actually not rely on one human for every whiff of sexual instinctual energy that's available to me. And when you're in these environments that are pretty uninteresting, unstimulating, with people that are not really teaching you anything new, super common, super high risk. And if you're the person that's actually attuned to that something's not right in my environment here, sex is sometimes the thing that starts you down your path, but it could be other things. And it's just important to really start to be familiar with what are the things that turn me on, both from a physical body standpoint, but also from an energetic, emotional, mental, spiritual, so many different ways that we can learn how to turn ourselves on.
If you are the other woman in your relationship and you love this podcast, you would love the Other Women community. The Other Women community is a membership program designed to help other women just like you reclaim their relationship with themselves and heal from their affair. We provide a safe and supportive environment for you to open up and talk about your experiences. We give you the tools and resources you need to grow into an authentic, empowered individual. If you're ready to take the next step in your healing journey, head on over to theotherwomanandthewife.com/community to learn more about the membership and all it has to offer. All right, let's jump back into the episode.
Well, can people get accurate in their assessment? Another thing that happens inside the community often, for me, at least just being the observer, is that women will say, I know why I'm so attracted to him. He's not my type. But I can't resist the attraction that exists. And to me, I'm like, you say you have a type and you've put it in black and white, but then all of a sudden you cross paths with someone who doesn't fit in these boxes that you put together. Aren't you just trying to put yourself in a box by declaring what your type is rather than discovering like what you are naturally attracted to?
Yes. And I think this is super interesting because I happen to be a typologist. I happen to be certified in the Enneagram as well as the Jungian cognitive functions. And this instinctual drive stuff is all a part of typology. So we can really get a deep dive into our type and understand ourselves in a way that we don't even know. So whenever you hear somebody say that this is who I am, they're basically presenting to you the self that they've come to recognize. And
Mhm.
we all know that midlife is that time when we start to crack open and everything about us that has been unconscious starts to bubble up to the surface.
Mhm.
So, when we're looking at what is making a good match for somebody, we also know that when we're young, and we're meeting somebody, let's face it, when you're early 20s, so many hormones, like you could pretty much be attracted to just about anything. And
Yeah.
then you get married and you introduce kids and you introduce the stresses of life and the environments that you have to navigate. And now all of a sudden, you need to have some compatibility. So, what is it that even made you say, yes, I'm going to marry you? Hopefully, you have some common values. Hopefully, you have some common interests because there's a whole lot of life that happens outside of the bedroom.
Mhm.
So, this is the part where people will start to get into trouble because you realize, wow, there was this amazing sexual instinctual energy that brought us together. And if we study the science of Helen Fisher, why we love, we know that those hormones will last about 18 to 24 months after you're living together. If you're not living together, you're not getting into that partnership zone that starts to extinguish those hormones because
Mhm.
it's all being run off of dopamine and norepinephrine, which is basically cocaine. So when
Mhm.
you're infatuated with somebody, you have cocaine brain. And just if you tried to talk to a fiending person on cocaine, you might not be completely rational. Somebody who's in the throes of infatuation or an affair is also basically on cocaine. So you have to
Mhm.
remember, oh, I'm trying to talk to my cocaine brain right now. And how do we get off cocaine? We basically have to withdraw from the substance. As soon as you start to get little whiffs of it again, it completely reignites. And then we can have more clarity around what is it that I want? Where am I going? What's happening here? Because the hormones that develop between a mature partnership are based more on oxytocin and endorphins. They're your
Mhm.
sweats and your slippers and your let's get a blanket and cuddle on the couch kind of hormones, which are also nice, but the body's always going to remember cocaine. And so there's going to be an aspect of that we want. So as partners, can learn how to still bring a little bit of novelty, a little bit of surprise. Anything that becomes too mechanical, has too much routine in it, is likely to be the death of sexual instinctual energy. So if you don't want that outside of your relationship, you have to figure out how to keep that inside of your relationship, and it can't be a one sided thing. Partners have to agree that this is important for both of us. And how do we do that?
Tell me more about how people do that.
See?
Because dead bedrooms, like, holy shit. I have met so many people who have been married for 2 decades and have not had sex with their spouse in the
Right,
last 15 years.
right.
So, based on what you're sharing right now, that sexual primal instinct energy died at about year 5. And
Yep,
then nobody taught them how to bring it back into the room, or they
right.
really just didn't want to.
And I think it's really important to ask yourself, how do I want to be in relationship to my sexual instinctual energy? Not everybody chooses to be sexually active. People experience sexual instinctual energy in ways that don't include sex. But if you're married to somebody that wants it to include sex, that's going to be a problem. So, this is where I think a lot of people are starting to have more creative conversations around what does sex even mean to us? For many people, if you're not having sex, all of a sudden there's the threat that we're not going to be together anymore. Now, we know that many couples find their way to polyamory or open marriages or some other arrangement where they acknowledge, oh no, we honor this partnership because of self preservation reasons. We're really good at running a house together. We've got the bills figured out. We're great partners in that domain. Or social, meaning like you're my best friend. Like, I like doing stuff with you. We've got these kids together. We're really aligned around raising them. I like your value system. You like mine. And then sexual just isn't a part of that. But if you want that with a partnership, you have to decide, am I brave enough to let my partner go experience that with somebody else? But every single time we start playing with fire, we have to remember our metaphor. the entire thing can come burning down because we never control fire 100%. Look at California and Colorado wildfires. We know that man does not control fire. And sexual instinctual energy is a combination of water and fire elements. And we don't control water either. Just go to Asheville and look at the floodlands. You have to acknowledge that you are taking a risk. But if the alternative is being in a dead zone because you and your partner absolutely cannot find your way out of that, and how do you find your way out of that if that's what you want? I think that you have to embark on a deep introspective journey. Personally, I think learning your Enneagram type, learning your Myers-Briggs type, learning your instinctual stack, understanding how that's all playing together to be the combination of things you are drawn to and the things that you are going to find very threatening and not enjoy is super important. And then understanding that about your partner, and then understanding how those energies start to play together. Because when you have that level of clarity, the amount of creativity that can start to emerge is pretty cool from my perspective.
How do you determine when the partnership lacks the amount of compatibility necessary for these things to come to light? Because I can already feel it. I feel a ton of women who are going to reference this episode, who are going to be like, but my husband will not partake in these conversations with me. How do you get to that point where you accept reality for what it is and make a different decision?
Yeah, I think that you as the woman have to have a very honest conversation with yourself about what am I getting out of this relationship? Is it my self-preservation needs, meaning that he's supporting me and paying my bills? So if you don't want to be in that relationship, that's going to mean that you have to figure out how to take on your own self-preservation, instinctual energy, and get yourself educated, pay your own bills, figure out how to navigate. Why haven't I been able to do that? Maybe it's for social reasons where it's going to devastate my family. I'm imagining it's going to be awful for my kids. I think that what we know about divorce literature is that it's way healthier for kids to be raised by two happy, healthy, separated parents than parents that are living in the house together with a lot of that toxic energy going on, because the kids feel it and will pick it up. And basically now they're going to enter a relationship where that's what's normal because it's what's imprinted on their little nervous systems. So to instead just be modeling the imperfect human that you are that's trying to figure it out will allow your own kids to be the imperfect humans that they will be and to figure it out. And the more kindness and care and compassion and integrity and clarity that we can navigate this journey with, the better outcomes we'll have in the long run. And now I'm like, what's a better outcome? I'm not ever particularly attached as to whether that means you stay together or you break up. To me, the best outcome is the one that includes the least amount of suffering for everybody impacted by the relationship. So there's a lot of different ways to get there. And what many people discover who choose to leave is that you're just signing up for a different set of frustrations and problems. So on some level, life is disappointing. Have you ever met anybody who's had the perfect job for their entire life and never had to remodel that? Or have you ever met anybody that's had one friend their whole life that is like the perfect friend? Or do we get lots of friends? And so to expect that there's going to be one partner that I can just lock and load and be happy with for the rest of my life, or that my own relationship to my own sexuality can lock and load, and that's just how it is for the rest of my life, very unlikely. We are emergent beings that are constantly changing. And all we can do is figure out what is my location at this point in time. And we can look back and try to say, these were all of my locations at all of these other points in time. And then we start to pattern recognize. And this is where we can actually start to develop a little bit more skillfulness of saying, when this set of factors have been in my life, I tend to act like this and I tend to have these kinds of outcomes. And if you don't know what that is yet, don't worry. The universe will continue to throw these situations at you so that you have lots and lots of data to see, how do I feel? What do I do? What happens when I do that? And we just keep collecting data and hopefully get a little more skillful along the way.
Yeah, if you haven't figured it out yet, you'll just keep getting the same problem showing up in your life on the regular until you learn your lesson.
Exactly. And I always say that real change only happens when we're finally sick of our own bullshit. So it's like, just keep doing that thing. Keep doing it. You clearly don't know why you don't want to yet.
Oh man. One of the things that I teach in coaching is that I tell them, I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that like you're getting the same outcome when you take this approach every single time. And I'm like, okay, and you're figuring out that you can't change the outcome. They're like, yes. And I'm like, do you think we could change the approach though?
Yeah.
And that usually highlights people's ability to direct themselves differently and come up with alternative strategies in vocalizing their needs, being able to have conversations with people that they always run into fights with. Wow, this is a really compelling conversation.
And if we keep doing the same thing again and again, and we're frustrated with ourselves that we're doing it, that's because there's some kind of an attachment or a little trauma link there. And so as a resonant healer, that's one of the things that I do with my clients is help them walk back to say, when did you develop the mental model that this was what you had to do in these situations to survive? Because
Totally.
that's what's at the root of it. And when we can go back to that moment that was so hard and that there really was no other choice but to do that thing in the moment, and we accompany that younger version of ourselves and we help that younger version to come home with us. And when she rises up inside, we know how to hold her and we know how to mother her, and we have confidence in our own ability to navigate what's going to happen, or have the wisdom to know when, oh, yeah, this thing might happen again. It's absolutely not safe. Because I like to make the analogy of we're basically in a savanna on a safari, and we have to learn the different creatures that are in our environment. And so if you're just dropped off in an African safari and you don't know the difference between a tiger and a gazelle, you're probably in trouble if you walk up to both of those creatures with the same strategy. With one of them, you're going to end up being their meal, and with the other one, they're just going to run away. So humans, unfortunately, don't walk around with tiger tattooed on their forehead or gazelle or whatever creature that they are. So this is another way that I think that typology and attachment work and really understanding that when people are showing up, it's not with any intention to cause harm or to piss you off. Very few people wake up with that as their goal for the day, but they're doing something that's meeting a need that they have that is now activating something inside of you. And then you respond in a way that activates something inside of them. And now we're off to the races. So really what we're all practicing is just noticing these object relations is what we call them, and learning when my body starts to get activated, and learning how polyvagal theory is another one that I love for how can we start to get back to the 0 point, like something that's more neutral. And from that place, I can have a lot more clarity. So I just want to make sure that listeners are not thinking this is simple, but not easy, and takes an incredible amount of practice and healing, because we all have a lot of trauma that we may not even be in contact with yet. And it's important to work with somebody that can help you get to the bottom of that before you expect major change in your life.
Absolutely. One of the things that I noticed in my own experience was unmet trauma and grief will create more trauma and grief. And until you really acquaint yourself with it, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And then being able to lift yourself up out of those trenches. But one of the things that I did want to touch on with you about is, so when I first started this business, I was like, it was very clear to me what I needed to do. I needed to model the conversations that weren't being had. And then the other thing was redirect their attention back to themselves. And one of the things that always comes up is people looking to assess, diagnose, like with all of these attachment theories and all of that. They do this thing where they want to get it accurate for the other person. When in my own quest, I'll call it, I made it very important to me that when I was looking at information, it was for me to understand myself better and how I interact with the world. and not an opportunity for me to label or diagnose or assess somebody that I didn't have inner access to. So can you speak a little bit about why the tendency to use all of this information and placate it onto others exists?
Yeah, I think that's such a interesting conversation. And like I said, I'm a typologist and I run an Enneagram think tank every week where we actually practice, can we diagnose type in other individuals by looking at the facial structure, by looking at the words they use, the gestures, the way their eyes move. So, this is a very hot topic because if all of a sudden you start to learn stuff about typology, about attachment, about astrology, whatever it is that you choose to learn, and then you walk out and start telling everybody, let me tell you all of these things about you, which I love to do, but I have learned that I need permission. That person is actually interested in what my perspective is as an outside observer of their inner world. Because one of the super common things that we do when we start on a growth journey, whether that's nonviolent communication or attachment studies or typology or any kind of therapy that you're talking about, is that we get so excited about what I'm seeing inside of me, and I can see it working on me and I can see myself changing, that now I have become the expert about what you need to do,
Thanks.
not necessarily for you, but you need to do these things so that my experience is better. So if we can just pick up on the narcissism that's coming out whenever we start telling somebody else what's wrong with them and how they might work with it, if they haven't come to us asking us for our opinions, that is a form of violence. And we have to remember that why do they need to change? Why can't they have these attachment structures they have? Why can't they be this unhealthy expression of the type they are? You can't do that because I want to be with you and I don't want to be with you if you're going to act that way. Once again, it's about me. So when we start going to our partners with all of this, people will have a very sensitive radar to, you're trying to manipulate me. You're trying to get what you want. And often in a partnership, we're each trying to get what we want from the other person. And we've both developed a lot of tricky ways of being passively aggressively denying of what our partner actually wants because our needs are so hot. So I think it's really important that we do some serious internal looking at what is our agenda. Because if our agenda is to change somebody else and the other person doesn't want to change, then it's violent.
And also, I would say reaching for an outcome. Like I'm a huge fan of being in the moment, experiencing what is meant for me, all of that. Anytime I trip myself up with, oh, and then once I get the attachment style correct, then I'll have all of my problems solved. I think that often people in my audience will be like, okay, I found out that he's avoidant attachment. I need to go. And I'm like, did you just collect that information so that you could give yourself permission to leave the relationship? Because it didn't really have to be that hard. But it's also the villainizing and there being a negative or positive charge with some of these labels that exist in society today. And I do fault short form content for it because it's like all of a sudden you have someone on a screen being like, oh my God. And if you're in an affair, you have a limerence addiction, what you were talking about with the Coke stuff. Whenever I researched it, these limerence addictions, they only last 18 months. So how does this explain away the 10-year affair that existed?
Yeah. No, not anything that can be wrapped up in like a 1 to 2 minute soundbite is clearly never the whole story. And there's a reason that it's a soundbite and there's a reason it's getting lots of clicks. So what's really interesting is to say, oh, what did that just validate in my worldview of being right that is making me so excited about this piece of information that I just found out? We love that. And it's just so important to remember it's a perspective. And at the end of the day, like you said, what is right for me and my experience. Isn't it interesting that we think experiencing pleasant sensations is what means it's right for me? Sometimes experiencing something unpleasant is what's actually going to help me grow.
Mhm.
So, understanding the discernment between how much avoidance of pain or pursuit of pleasure am I personally engaged in, and
Yeah.
understanding that both are important to have in our lives, but yet we have certain strategies of this is how I'm going to get pleasure, or this is how I'm going to avoid pain. And these
Mhm.
types of suffering are okay in my life, and these types of suffering are not. And of course, if you're physically not safe, if there's a whole list of keep yourself alive, keep yourself safe. But what we define as safe, people have very different definitions of this is just not a safe environment for me.
Mhm.
Okay, some people might think it is. And so, how do we define these things? And when we're talking about villainizing, there's a ton of words like narcissism, borderline. Do we even know what these things are and how are we defining them?
And
You know,
also, I just think whenever I think of the word narcissist, because like a lot of the short form content is like, beware of narcissists. And I'm
right.
like, why are we doing this with diagnosis? Like, why can't we have a neutral vantage point on this is what a narcissist is? And I remember early on when I first got on to social media, being like, aren't narcissists worthy of love too? Like, why does this have such a fear charge within it, the way that the information is being presented? And I whittled it down to people like to name call. And sometimes using a word like narcissist when everybody is afraid of that label makes you feel like you can protect yourself because you already know that they're a narcissist, or like trying to get them to understand that you don't want them in their world, but you're still talking to them and you're
Yeah.
still like participating in the fight.
We always have to ask ourselves, why did I choose to be with a narcissist? What does that
Mhm.
tell me about my own relationship to my boundaries? It's always two to tango. So if I ended up in a relationship with a narcissist, what were the cues or the signs or the things that I wasn't able to do that allowed me to be in that situation? And once again, I want to be very careful that we're not blaming victims because, of course, there are certain behaviors that nobody should have to experience. But we bring things out of each other, and things only exist because we reward it in some way in society. So I'm
Yeah,
going to give a shout out to one of my colleagues, Sterling Mosley, who wrote a book called The 27 Types of Narcissism, or it's The Narcissist in You, because there are actually 27 flavors of narcissism. And when you read it, I'm sure that each one of us has a flavor of this,
I
because
love it.
the clinical diagnosis of narcissism is just an extreme version of a certain constellation of personality types. But when you understand how each personality type enacts violence in its own way, there are certain ones that we've categorized as problematic and certain ones that we actually glorify that are incredibly narcissistic. So,
Totally.
this is a great book to really find yourself in and become familiar with your own version of narcissism. Because if
Yeah.
you really want to not invite narcissists into your life, what's coming up for me is whoever smelt it, dealt it. How is a version of that showing up inside of me?
This is so good.
The
I am
poem that's
so
also
glad you
arising.
invited me to lunch.
Oh,
I was
thanks.
like, I was totally, when I was at that retreat, I was like, I'm just going to be there. We're going to see how this goes. Maybe I'll leave. Maybe I won't. We'll see what happens. And you came up, you invited me to lunch, and I was like, yeah. And I loved the way that you had approached me. You were so assertive. And that made
Well,
me
I
so
liked your
happy.
scent. And when I smell something I like, I have to just go. I was at the Botanic Gardens yesterday. My face was buried in flowers, and you just
Oh
got to
my
smell it.
gosh. That
And
was the best baby shower advice anyone ever gave to me. They said on this little piece of paper, they had said, don't forget to teach your babies how to listen to the birds sing and smell the flowers. And so
Mhm,
every time we walk out and about, we are smelling flowers and listening for the birds. And
100%.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that you pay so much attention to your senses.
I've had to learn that. So we'll just give that little dose of humility. I'll share with your listeners. I'm 51 years old. I'm on my fourth long-term committed relationship. I was married for 17 years. I have 4 children. They're now 17, 19, 20, and 25. I have experienced so much of what we're talking about here. And really, it did propel my own personal growth journey. And through my own healing, I went on certification pathways, and everything I'm certified in, I have benefited from myself.
And you're
And
an
yeah,
MD.
yeah, that is the complex thinking. I'm an internal
You're
medicine doctor. Yeah.
You're
So
so cute. I freaking love the way that you reacted to and those credentials. You're so enthused about these other ones. Most people are like, MD, oh wow. And you're just like, no, that's not the one that does it for me.
because being a medical doctor, I guess what you're sensing is that I have a lot of judgments about the current healthcare system as it exists.
Mhm.
And I am sad that many physicians are perpetuating the model by continuing to practice within it. So I have always been self employed. As soon as I realized what the model was, I divorced Western medicine and have been blazing my own path through my own business, through my own life. And that is really where a lot of that comes from because doctors are mostly asleep and it's not all their fault. It's the capitalistic, patriarchal healthcare system that we live in. And that's going to take a while to change, just like all of these things. So, personally, I've had my private practice taking care of the same group of people in the suburbs for 22 years, which has given me a front row seat to all the affairs, all the divorces, all the
Yes.
marriages, all the babies, all the putting your parents in assisted living, like the full catastrophe of human existence. And it hasn't been easy for me, and it hasn't been easy for anyone I know. So, why don't we start figuring out where are the pain points? Because we are complex adaptive systems, and there is no one thing that's causing all of this. It's multifactorial, and it really takes people who are doing the kind of work that you're doing, where what you want to be is a seeker after truth. And
Yes.
sometimes there's that movie, You Can't Handle the Truth. And that's true. Like we sometimes can't handle the truth about ourselves. We can't handle the truth about our partner. We can't handle the truth about the world. But whenever I work with a client, it really is about let's just make it real. There are no angels, there are no devils, but let's just make it real. We're all just dancing to our own little agenda.
Oh my
And the
gosh.
sooner we can be honest about that, the sooner we can write a better script.
I freaking love you so much. Have to have you back on the podcast if you have the time and you're willing. But dude, this was incredible.
It was super fun. I'll come back
It
anytime.
was so fun. And
Yeah.
I'm excited because it sounds like Josh is going to get a spot on the podcast too. And he's been teaching me about what I'm doing as well. That's probably my favorite thing is that you guys were willing. Because some people, I would say what I was doing on the internet and they'd be like, wow, all of their own personal judgments and biases would surface. You guys were like, cool.
Yeah, we just love keeping it real.
Keeping it real is the way to go. It's the only sustainable way I'm finding out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I love you. And I
I love
will
you
talk
too.
to you soon.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast episode. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts on it. If you've made it this far, you're likely someone who is invested in the journey of being the other woman. We understand that this can be a difficult and complex experience, which is why we offer guided coaching to help you heal and move forward. We encourage you to explore the links in the episode description or visit theotherwomanandthewife.com/coaching to learn more about our exclusive coaching program and apply today. Thank you again for your support, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.